Welcome to the Pantheon.Plus Rewind.
What is going on, everybody? Happy Sunday, and welcome to episode 11 of the Rewind. So let's start with some rather big news that means changes for the show and Pantheon.Plus in general. To begin with, we're sad to find out due to real-life commitments that Omega Contagion, our brother in crime here on the Rewind, will be unable to contribute to the show for this foreseeable future, I guess is the way I should say it. Both Theric and I would like to thank him for everything he's done to make this show a success and make it honestly one of the most enjoyable content series I've ever had the pleasure of being part of. Without Omega, I don't think we would have gotten here, and that's really a true fact. That said, he's left the show in good hands, and we're going to be moving forward with just a few small changes. First, we'll be removing the genre section and replacing it with a new segment called the Wishlist. And you'll hear more about this later on in the show. We'll also be changing up the content creator section just a tiny bit in order to focus it more on what's been added to Pantheon.Plus within the last week, as well as features we're working on and feedback we get from the community or ideas regarding any future things that may occur on the site. We want to make sure that the time and effort put into Pantheon.Plus is proper to provide the community with a resource that they can use and share, and they want to also use and share. So you'll still hear about all the content being put out by creators, but just in a slightly different format. As is such with Omega having real-life commitments that hinder his free time, I'm going to go right ahead and say that I, too, am in that same boat as Omega. Now that I've re-entered the workforce a little bit here, life is getting a little bit more back to normal in post-ish COVID world, I guess. Due to this, I've spent a lot of time talking with the Pantheon.Plus team, trying to figure out what's best for the future in regards to our content creation and our weekly schedule. So with that said, I'm going to announce a couple changes here for the first time. The first is with the show Rankum. This is a really hard one, and it hurts my heart because I absolutely loved this show's creation. And moving forward, I think we're just going to have to suspend this offering, unfortunately. As we looked into driving Pantheon.Plus and driving forward with exciting content that contributes to getting the word out about Pantheon, while the show's amazing and I loved it again, it was sort of just a fun sideshow, like being a nerd, which I have no problem with. I've struggled with this decision greatly because I hated that we just designed this new show and we have to end it so quickly. But that said, who knows what the future holds? So maybe we'll see it come back. But thank you to everyone who supported it on its very short run. So the next one here is Pantheon.Plus U. That's our signature show and easily our most popular show. For those of you who haven't kept track exactly, we're actually almost at 40 episodes. And we've talked about mechanics, MMORPG systems. I mean, anything that can relate to an MMO that we can then relate to Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, or even just Pantheon Rise of the Fallen content or news that comes out. We've talked about things from graphics to transmog to guilds to classes. We even held an NFL-style draft. We've had interviews. The list goes on. But because we want Pantheon.Plus U to be a quality show above all else, we're going to actually shift it from a weekly offering to about twice a month instead. Now, if something huge comes up or an opportunity to do an interview, maybe we'll expand that a little bit. But we do feel that this will help us to get some solid topics and find unique guests who can provide a different viewpoint on our topics. The format moving forward will be one Pantheon.Plus developer recap a month and one topic-based show. On our recap shows, I'm going to actually have Theric as my permanent co-host, and on our topic shows, we'll rotate it so we can have a different feel. Again, our reasoning here is quality and coming up with a strong monthly topic to discuss. The Rewind, which you're listening to now, will be our every week offering moving forward. You can depend on us to put this out every Sunday to recap what's going on in the Pantheon world and hyping up what's to come. We will, however, be more focused on Pantheon than we have been in the past, spending more time on the community section, which Theric does a great job of. These changes, while some are heartbreaking, are needed for us to be able to hit our priorities of just driving the community or driving Pantheon or driving the website. We really want it to be something that you guys can find as helpful, but also free us up to not just stream content, but to make smaller, easier to consume video content as well, like we've done in the past, which I also enjoy greatly. Which, we just haven't had the time. I mean, Theric, thankfully, has been putting out the lore videos, and we've gotten a few out from time to time, but we haven't had the time to really dig in and get out good news-style videos with good content. With anything, change is hard, but I'm super, super, super thankful to have an amazing team to work with here at Pantheon.Plus And I really do thank all of you that continue to support us as we continue to adapt and grow. So, Derek, I don't know if you're still awake. I'm sorry that was extraordinarily long-winded. Anything to add on any of that?
I do. Yeah. You mentioned being thankful for a great team. And I just wanted to say, I know Omega is probably listening. He's not working with us anymore here, but it was a privilege to work with him. I really enjoyed getting to know him just as a person as well. And, all the best to him going forward. But I'm excited for the show here and the future of us. And I'm ready to go. So if you are, let's do it.
Well, hey, it was only about 5 minutes or so that we took to get to the first topic. So that's not too bad. So let's go ahead and jump to it. This week in Visionary Realms news and notes. Okay, first in VR news, we're going to talk about the Joppa interview that was held by Bazgrim on Friday night on Baz's Twitch channel. And for those that are unaware, he hosted an interview that was focused around the combat system and limited hotbars. If you want to see the entire interview, be sure to watch it on demand at twitch.tv/BazgrimTV or on youtube.com/BazgrimTV. But I wanted to give some highlights here and invite you as well, Theric, to give some of your opinions on this. And some of this is going to be pretty paraphrased. I don't have the exact word for word quotes, but I am not misrepresenting anything that Joppa or Baz said. It's just kind of summing it up a little bit to make it a little easier to digest here on the show. So the first thing that was talked about whenever the whole limited action set was brought up, and Bazgrim openly said he's not really a big fan of limited action set, but he was open to discussing it and having his mind change, which was really cool. So for this interview, the first thing Joppa said was he talked about high-level design, which he called broad stroke philosophy, and then low-level design, which was like boots on the ground. How do I take it from concept and work it into an actual real reality within the game? I think that's important because the one thing that was commonly said through all this is while they have their ideas and they really want to implement things in certain ways, if something really doesn't work or there's major problems, they're going to listen, which I think is really important.
Right. Yeah, it's always nice to hear, they're paying attention to the consequences of actually implementing a high level idea, right? Because it always sounds good sometimes when you think about it from a bird's eye view and then you try to implement it and it's like, oh, okay, that doesn't really work or that needs to be tweaked somehow. So, they're always aware of that sort of thing.
Yeah. So he explained, one of the things when it comes to limited action set is that he wants everyone to be very aware of what is in the group, how the group is made up and how they can come together to have their own roles and their own characters that they bring, their characteristics, their skills. And that's super important to why there's limited action sets. So we're going to kind of talk about this in different ways going forward a few times. But he just likes the invoking of, I guess, that pregame strategy or setup. And it also gives a different level of creativity and a new way to properly deal with something that you may not be able to quite anticipate. And he said that, when you have every ability on your bar and you have a whole arsenal in front of you, you have more of a one-to-one answer for every problem, and that actually limits creativity. Whereas on the reverse side, it causes you to really learn from one another and to become more creative when you don't have that one-to-one answer and you are limited in your set. Theric, do you agree with that statement or how do you feel about that?
I do 100%. It's funny because limited action sets, my opinion when going into following Pantheon was very middle of the road. I was sort of either way is fine. And then I sort of leaned towards, no, I don't really like the limited idea. But as I've learned more about it and I've heard more arguments for and against, this has really solidified it for me that why it's necessary and what it means to the game. And the way Joppa described it as being, you make your decisions ahead of time as opposed to in the heat of the battle when you're, trying to sift through all your abilities to find, to go with the rotation that you think is going to work best. You've taken the time ahead of time to do that. So I like that approach. And I think I've become pretty convinced that this is the right way to go.
Yeah. And it's funny because people are like, well, if I have all my abilities, I'll be ready to handle anything. Well, no, you just have to adapt, right? Just in the moment, adapt. And we'll talk about this in a few minutes here when we wrap this up. So I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but we're also going to hit a couple quick things that are said. So Joppa said, sort of in a quote, again, it's paraphrased, but doing something so everybody always says, well, if you don't have all your skills, you're just going to fail and you're going to die. Then you're going to have to go memorize different spells. And he said doing something and defining something this way doesn't mean that you're just going to fail. The goal is not to learn from failure all the time. Of course, sometimes that'll happen. And he said, but that's not unique to a limited action set. In every single MMORPG, it's there. The ability to die, the ability to learn from death. But it shouldn't be considered an inevitable result just because of limited action set, which kind of harps back on. Yeah.
Yeah, he said it shouldn't be considered a failure, which is 100% right. Like it isn't a failure. You don't learn if you don't try new things, if something doesn't work. Like dying and death is not the failure. Becoming bored or becoming complacent, that's the failure in my mind, and that's when I lose interest in a game. So I think he's got it.
Yeah. The next thing that stood out to me is Baz asked him this question. This is the question that's floating around, like all the trolls and I just don't understand how people get to these types of thoughts. So Baz asked, just to get rid of it, but does limited action set have anything to do with porting this game to consoles? And Joppa just very plainly said, no, not in the slightest.
I had never heard that before. I had no idea that was a thing out there, but apparently it is. So.
It's been a new thing on Reddit. That's where I've seen it most. Like everyone's like, oh, they're making this game for consoles. Which if the game plays exactly as it does on PC and it's also to be played on console, who cares? Like, why is people are, oh, it's ridiculous. That's so ridiculous to me. I'm going to lose my crap here. All right.
Yeah.
The next one here is, will you be able to change abilities in combat? Again, very, very clear answer. It was no. Like immediately like no, and don't ask because we're not doing it.
Yep. Gotta be clear. Gotta be clear, right?
Yeah, and it brought up a really interesting conversation here because Bazgrim's response was, well, what if you get jumped and you don't have your abilities set? And I wanted to answer this for him, but Joppa did a pretty good job here of saying almost exactly what I wanted to say. And he said, then you rely on the other members of your group or the people around you, or you run away. He goes, he quoted, this was a real quote, word for word. I have empathy for people who try to play this out in their head. That's what he said. But then he kind of paraphrasing said, when you're conditioned by the system, you're going to know when you don't want to put your downtime loadouts on. The system's going to teach you to be careful. And that said, in a situation where you get jumped or you aren't ready, it becomes a learning session. Like that's what that is. You just learned a lesson. And if you're not in a safe zone, my question is, why are you changing spells? Like, why are all your buffs on if you're in a dangerous area?
Well, we've gotten bad habits over the years, right? Like we've gotten into some bad habits from other games. So
we really have. Bazgrim asked him, is going to be a way to switch out loadouts? And in a short form, he basically said, you're going to be able to do this pretty easily. And we've seen that, right? In the book, the spell book.
The codex.
Yeah, the codex. I'm sorry. The codex has like the tabbing colors, and I bet that has something to do with it, is what I've always thought. But he said that the goal is to make it very simple and seamless. So really good. This is interesting because we've been talking and on Pantheon.Plus, we have like the spells laid out, and we've had to make it pretty clear that we don't necessarily know what's an action or utility. We're really guessing. But the next comment he makes here is actually going to make me go back and look at how we did that, because he talked about how abilities are broken into two categories, which we know, action and utility. 8 slots for action, 6 slots for utility, and 14 of those abilities will be available to you into combat. But he talked about what's going to define these abilities, and this was huge. For me, this was huge beans. I don't know if anybody else thought so. But he said that abilities are broken into categories based on one guiding principle: action abilities that apply hate or threat to a target. That's an action ability. Anything that doesn't, it's utility. Interesting way of putting that. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I picked up on that too. I noted it in the chat. I said, "Hey, this is a nugget of information that we don't have, I don't think." It was quite interesting because it really helps you differentiate now between looking at the skills and differentiating between what you can put on one bar and what you can put on the other. So when you're sort of planning ahead for your class and thinking about your class and your loadouts, with the limited information we have at this point regarding some of the skills, it's going to help. So I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, and we got into this was probably what I would say if you had to take like one category we learned the most beans about. It's so funny this community has dubbed these as beans. That's Nathan's fault, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, 100% Nathan's fault.
Of course, Nathan. Of course. Thank you, Nathan. Beans. It was really about buffs. I think we learned more about what they want to do with buffs, and it also sounds like it's sort of a newer decision. So there's a lot here that I'm going to try to sum up shortly in what they're going to do with buffs. So they said that the only abilities available to you are the 14 abilities to set on your action or utility bar, and the way buffs are going to work. So first, they said that there's steroid type buffs. They're very potent, short duration. Think of like a quick buff that's going to make you strong for 5 seconds to 5 minutes. They said anything beyond 5 minutes will be a long duration buff. Long duration buffs at this point are being moved away from having any duration, which is very interesting. So instead, they'll just stay active indefinitely, almost like turning on auras for your group. And as long as it's on your bar, it'll work. But if you take it off your bar, the effect of the buff goes away. So this cuts down on the drain of keeping buffs up regularly. And the general bars that you normally have will be available for like quest items, macros, standard food and drink, or like professional abilities. And that was pretty interesting because the immediate conversation that came up is, how is this going to affect drive-by buffing? Right? Like if you buff someone, then you take it off your bar, they won't have the buff anymore. And can you buff them if they're not in your group? So they answered that, which was awesome because that was a huge call out right away. And Bazgrim was really quick to jump on that because the chat was firing that up. And basically said the plan, it should work as follows. When you put a buff on somebody outside of your group, it's going to have a global duration, no matter what the buff is. It's an intentionally shorter duration, and most likely there'll be some sort of degradation in its potency. And when somebody outside of your party is buffed by you. And it can also get a second degradation of potency based on the level difference of the spell and the character. So before I get into his theory on and why they're doing this, what did you think when you heard that?
Well, I thought it was interesting because Joppa right away knew how this would, be received from a social perspective, because it's one of the things that we all remember is how cool it was. And he talked about this, is getting a cool buff from a higher level character, and or asking somebody, or offering that to another player, right? That social element is very important in a game like this. And if you do this, you are impacting that. So he spoke about that, and I thought that was really important. But it's one of those trade-offs that you have to make to address some of the issues that come along with with power leveling and that kind of stuff. I think he called it like the leveling mill of applying high level buffs to another player. So I thought he explained it well.
Yeah, and that's exactly the next thing I was going to talk about is, one of the things he said is, while you love the social element, like you said, the impact creates these leveling mills, right? And he even talked about how like a druid back in the day was more wanted to be a power leveler than an actual contributing member of the guild. He's like, and that's not what he wants to see happen to classes, to get these big guilds that all they do is just power level. And then he dropped a little bit of I don't want to say beans because we know it's there, but he dropped a little bit of a hint that like he wants to do this so that power leveling doesn't ruin the progeny system. So he said, if people are able to just run these power level, mills, and you're just leveling super fast, then it's going to really degrade the effect of this progeny system that they're working on.
Yeah, I'm so excited. This is like the third time in a row he's mentioned the progeny system in like his last three streams. That's the last 3 times we've heard him speak. So I mean, he's clearly making an attempt to keep it in our minds, which I love. I love that system.
Maybe he's really waiting for us to ping him with questions, like Joppa. So let's talk about progeny. You brought this up right now.
Exactly.
So good stuff there. They did go a little bit more into the general bars. So they said, this was surprising to me. So they said you're going to have standard of a dual 8 slot on the right-hand side of the screen, which I think we've seen. But he said that you're going to be able to add more for the interface menu. So these general bars seem to be however many you want. And it's going to be like, yeah, and they're going to be like, it's hard to explain this because they really got into the potions and elixirs thing. And it seems a little like there's different types, but certain types of like potions or elixir, or stuff like that will be on a separate bar that we've never seen before. That's like a utility belt, but that like most of the things that are going to be on the general bar are going to be like, the macros and stuff like that, and clickies and quest items. So that's pretty interesting.
It is. Yeah. It sounds like we're going to have quite a few bars at the end of the day. We have our 2 main ones, but then there's quite a few smaller sort of tertiary bars as well.
Really quick thing that was brought up, and I really like this, is around the pet classes. So Bazgrim asked straight up, will pet abilities be on separate hotbars? And he also threw in a, hey, Necromancer's a pet class, right? He's like, yeah, yes, it is. And then he's like, well, it can be, right? So there might be two different ways to play a Necro, which is cool. But Joppa just came out and said that pets are going to have their own bar because standard bars would be too punitive to the pet's skills, especially as they grow. And I think this is the right move. And I actually had a long discussion with Sacred where we were going back and forth on limited action set a while back. Because he wasn't a fan of it back in the day. And he brought up, well, what about pets? This is going to make pet classes really hard to manage. And I just said, well, why don't you just have a bar for it? He's like, well, then you're changing the whole system. So why does this class get? And I said, because sometimes you just have to make exceptions because it makes sense. And I think it's cool that they did that because it's important to me that if it doesn't work for like a couple classes, then just change it for those classes. You don't have to change the whole system. And it makes sense. The next one here got me a little fired up. I'm not going to lie. So Baz asked the question or kind of sort of a statement here where he said he feels like there's a conflicting issue between the systems of dispositions and limited action set. So let me talk about what Joppa had to say first, and then I'm curious about your opinion on it, and I'm going to give mine too. So Joppa referenced that preparing for an arena fight in WoW was how he talked about this, and this is pretty interesting. So if you haven't ever played WoW, essentially an arena fight in WoW is like, it's like a 3v3, typically is the way people play it. You start in one side of the arena and the other team starts on the other side. And you can kind of tell what you're going to be fighting from a class standpoint, right? So what he said is, there's a slight bit of prep at that point to know what you're up against. So, okay, they have a mage, a warrior, and a shaman, right? It's like, okay, well, what are they capable of? You start thinking and planning with your group. And you do have a little bit of time to change your spec up and put your ability bars and set them up. So he said, you don't know exactly what spec you're fighting, right? So if one of those is a mage, it could be a fire mage or it could be a frost mage. But you have to make a decision on what spec you want to be, but also how to work within your group, which is exactly what limited action set's going to do in Pantheon. You're going to take this strategy concept that was only available in PvP, or more so available in PvP, and it's going to put it into the PvE content, which is going to make it more challenging, which is what we all want. And he said that, you kind of make an idea of what might be coming and how to deal with it, but sometimes you're wrong. And he said very distinctly, if you misguess, do you just die? Like, does everyone say, oh, well, that was a frost mage, not a fire mage, so we're just going to quit? Or do you adapt and you find a way through it with the abilities you have? And it was great because he provided his own devil's advocate here. He said, in WoW, you have all your abilities, so that's going to be the thing that people are going to say. He's like, but you don't. He's like, you're either a frost mage, a fire mage, or an arcane mage. You can't access those other spells depending on what you pick. And I thought that was a genius way for people that use WoW and say, well, you can use all your abilities. No, you can't. It seems like you can. It's a false perception that you can, but you can't, right?
Yeah.
So
this made me think of Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering if you play that. I mean, basically the same game. Now, when you go into a tournament in Hearthstone, you bring your decks. You know what's in your decks, but you don't know what your opponent's decks are, right? And you don't know what you generally have an idea because there's a meta or whatever, and sort of the standard deck archetypes, but you don't know exactly what your opponent has. Now you can tech in certain cards to deal with things you think that you might see, right? And this is sort of the same idea. It's like, you don't have to know exactly what your opponent is. You can do the best you can make a good guess. You can make an educated guess or an experienced guess, but there's going to be variance, and there's going to be a chance that you're fighting in a certain mob and they pop with a disposition that you weren't anticipating. And so what your setup allows you to do may not be the best for that disposition that you come across, but that doesn't mean it's an auto loss. It means you have to adjust. It means you have to think and you have to use your members of your group who, think of them as like your deck of cards, right? And think of the cards in your deck. You got to use your group members to counter that, or to do something to at least minimize the damage of that. So I like the example he gave, and that's how it sort of resonated with me.
Yeah, the last thing he said here was, it's a group-centric game. If you don't have the answer, someone in your group will. And if they don't, death happens, right? Like,
yeah.
That's
it's a group game, man. You've got, like you said, you kept saying in chat, you don't
I
have 14 skills, or you don't have 8 skills on your action bar. You've got 48 because you're in a group of 6, right? Like,
I'm so happy you said that, because that's going to be the next thing I said. I don't understand why people can't. And I do understand. Like, I'm not trying to sound like a jerk. I understand that we've been programmed to think a certain way because that's how games have worked. And I understand that sometimes it's hard to think outside the box when you're programmed to think a certain way. Totally understand that. But yes, when you're so concerned that the reason the whole group died is because I didn't have the 8 spells I wanted, that's ridiculous. Number one, it's like an overinflated ego because it's not just you. You could die and your group could still get through it. Like, right?
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to me that, you know, when you are prepping, like Joppa says he wants to prep, you know, you sit there with your team for 10 minutes, maybe less if you know your group, and you say, okay, who's taking CC? Who's got heals? Okay, you know what? You guys have a lot of control. I'm just going to be straight DPS tonight. I'll do some scouting. So let me do some stuff to, like, you know, fade or distract mobs or whatever I'm going to do. And you plan your group out. It's not like you're going to be like, hey, nobody has CC all of a sudden. That's not how it's going to work. Like, you're going to want all your bases covered. And between 48 spells, you should be able to do so. And it just makes me crazy. And I think that that people are forgetting about CC being a thing. You know, in WoW, if you got jumped by a group in like a super hard Mythic Plus and you weren't ready and you just died instantaneously, okay, that's how it is. But in this game where strategy is going to be very important and there's control, you know, you can slow combat down. So if you do have some control people in your group and you get into a sticky situation, you just slow stuff down a little bit. Okay, let's slow it all down. Let's mez some stuff. Let's think, how are we going to do this? Let's talk through it. Let's take this mob out. You know, there's a lot more strategy to it when you have control. And I think people are overreacting a lot to that.
I'm just not used to having tools that we're going to have available, right? We haven't had those kind of tools available. So we got to learn how to use them again. We got to learn how they can, you know, how they can make these kinds of situations tenable, how we can deal with them.
And, you know, when the game's being designed around it and the combat is designed around it, the enemies you're fighting are designed around it, I'm thinking it's going to be okay.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, the other thing about dispositions that's odd to me is, like, Diablo 3 is a super popular game, right? Am I crazy? I mean, I know people like rip on it, but it's super popular. And they have elite packs in there. And elite packs is exactly what dispositions are. Like, no offense to Pantheon, I'm not trying to say they stole it or anything, but it's a concept that's very familiar. It's not a brand new concept. I think that they have a way to make it work differently in an MMORPG for sure, but the whole concept is the same. And in Diablo, whenever you run into you know, an elite pack, you don't just like run away and change your whole spec. You just fight them differently. Like, okay, well, this mob's going to do that, so I'm going to need to kite it around a little bit more. Or this mob's going to, you know, be really fast, so I need to like kind of watch this one and kind of keep them away, or I need to get in close because they're throwing meteors out. Like, whatever these dispositions are going to do, you don't need to change your whole character to fight them. You have to change your thought process on how you fight them. And I think that that's a misconception as well right now about like these moments of, oh no, I don't have the one spell I want. So
yeah, I agree.
Then just 3 really quick tidbits, and that's going to wrap that up. One is he said that keepers are going to be able to let you know what mobs are going to do from a distance and prepare you for what's coming. Now, I think that a long time ago, something like this was said, maybe not so clear, but it's been a long time, and there's been a lot of talk that keepers are not going to be, you know, rewarded, and it's kind of, they don't want to gate with it. But this was really nice to hear now that there is going to be something. And I think there's a lot more to come with this.
Yeah, it's not new information, but it's timely information. I think it was well said at the time because there was a lot of question about that.
And if I'm not mistaken, was it on Pantheon.Plus to you that he said that they're going to be coming out and talking a lot more on what a keeper's role is going to be and the impact they're going to have on the world and what it's going to mean to be a keeper? So keep tuned for that, because it looks like that might be on their agenda shortly here. We might see it in a dev stream or something. Then the last 2 things, core distinct abilities. Joppa said he estimates probably 20 to 30 per class. And this was brought up because of the whole down ranking of spells going away. And then he said that does, however, exclude like epic spells. Like, so he's just saying core base abilities, probably 20 to 30 per class, which is fine. And that each race is going to have 1 active racial ability. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So very, very interesting interview there. Thank you to Bazgrim for having that on. It was as outstanding to get together with the community for anything, but having a Friday night to get together, getting everybody energized. There's a lot of post conversation. So thank you to Joppa and Bazgrim for putting together an awesome interview there and giving a lot of information when you read between the lines there for sure. Okay, so it's hard to step down from a Joppa interview, but we do a couple of the VR on Twitter here, and we're going to go through them quickly because we do have a lot to talk about tonight. So the first thing that was asked is, what would you like to be remembered for in Pantheon? Micah said, bringing glory and prosperity back to the elven people. Well,
yes. Go
away,
Micah.
Go away, Micah. Jeez. Drac Attack said, community blogger of Pantheon Adventures. Alicera said, collecting all of the pets. Bazgrim was funny here, and I had to comment on this. So he says, being one of the pre-launch members that helped set the tone for a community that's welcoming, informed, and helpful. Very good answer, but he was picked on jokingly by Disposalist, who said, that's already guaranteed, Baz, pick something else. So my response was, how about you become the first content creator with a Fu Manchu? So I'm challenging Bazgrim.
Oh my God.
Yep, I'm challenging Bazgrim to grow a Fu Manchu.
If you can get him to grow a Fu Manchu, man, you're a hero. Like that is the best thing ever. I got to see. He's already got the mutton chops a little bit. But, just take it to the next level. You know, the Fu Manchu is definitely next level.
I think that's what we got to do. Lexer said that he wants to be known for his loving and soft-spoken nature. And Stands in Fire immediately responded, I roll to disbelieve.
I think he's ruined that. Chances of that happening.
Yeah. Zorlof said, I just want to be a positive influencer in a game that helps encourage people not to be toxic. There's a lot of really nice people with this. Sarah said, her name's Sarah Maria, at Sarah Maria. She said, I would like to be known as someone who's always willing to help. Being a part of a guild committed to keeping the community of its server progressing, aka the Giver. Nocturnal Demise says, as the person in the guild that comes up with all the wacky and fun events to do, I want that guy in my guild. That sounds like the guy who organizes the drunken heroic nights of like running dungeons. Yeah. Nimicry says, new player guru. I want to be a one-man wiki. That's cool. And then Nauticus. He says that the guy who helped the other guy solve the impossible thing.
Nice. Yeah.
So I think for me, this is going to be cheesy, but I think I just want to be remembered as a welcoming, non-selfish content creator that can help you learn something, make you think. Most importantly, be someone you want to have a beer with and laugh over some fun gaming stories. So kind of like Bazgrim, being a little cheesy and easy, but that's what I want. How about you, Theric?
I just want to be the guy that's easygoing and helps people learn the game, like in game. Like I want to be that person that you remember 20 years later is like, oh man, that guy dragged my corpse out of that area. Like that guy was awesome. Like I don't, I'm not looking for accolades. I just like doing stuff like that because it's fun and it's helpful. So, and it creates a good community. At the end of the day, that's what this is all about. So that's what I'll go for.
Got it out. The next thing on Twitter they asked was double XP, yay or nay? So Micah said, I think double XP can be really useful in games like in the Final Fantasy MMOs where you can level up every class on one character. But if you can only have one per character, no need. Nathan says, nay, I want to crawl my way through levels if possible, savoring every morsel. Zergjerk said, we are the knights who say nay. Why? Because of the shrubbery, which is a fantastic Monty Python reference. Alicera says, yeah, I like the double XP in special event buff form or maybe a pot that can that a main can buy for an alt after doing certain things at high levels. Project Valhalla said, it might be cool to have a monthly random zone that offers double XP for a few days. And there was a response where someone said, you know what, I kind of really like the idea of a rotating bonus to dungeons, but maybe not double, which is actually pretty interesting. And then Ducky Beard said, I do not like double XP events in a hardcore MMO. So my thoughts are this on this topic, and it might surprise you actually. Double XP to me is very similar and maybe a little looser than my example I'm going to give here, but it's kind of a way to skip content. It might not be exactly the same as like flying mounts or fast travel, but honestly, it's the same thing. It's really in the same realm. I mean, if the game is designed to take a certain level of time to level, or where you got to grind XP camps and grow out in the world, there's just no reason for me to think that you should speed that up. I mean, it's okay if you can't play as much as others. Take your time leveling and playing. Don't worry about the end goal. Enjoy the journey. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I not even double XP, just no XP boosts. I don't understand the reason for it. I mean, that's part of the challenge is finding those spots where you're grinding or you have a good camp and you're getting good XP. I don't need a reason to play the game outside of the game itself. You know, don't make it a double XP weekend to try to get me to log in that weekend for some reason. Stuff like that. I am not a huge fan at all. So just keep it 1-to-1 and don't mess around with that stuff.
Yeah. So the last thing they talked about was busy couple days here on Twitter. What was the most memorable NPC interaction? So I got to call Bazgrim out. I just gave him a ton of praise, so I think I can balance it a little bit. He said, I'm struggling to think of one, and that's really sad. It's a guy who's played a lot of MMOs. He said that NPCs and MMORPGs are largely forgettable since there's really a rare reason to actually listen to what they have to say, especially if you can just hit accept and read the cliff notes later. It shouldn't be like that. This is probably one of the biggest takes I'm going to disagree with Bazgrim on. I have tons of memories, so I don't know. Dave Pryor said Hasten Boot Strutter. That's one I remember. Disposalist says Fippy. So, I mean, everybody knows Fippy.
Good old Fippy.
Yeah, I mean, Jared Woodhouse, Mirth, that a lot of us know him by, Priest of Discord and EverQuest. And he said, number one, you mess up handing him the book and having to remake your character. Or two, killing him out of revenge once you've leveled and hoping you drop that staff. Then we have Nicario Gaming, which I did not pronounce right. WoW, Warlords of Draenor, the story of Yrel, an NPC that we met as a slave and helped her journey to become a leader of her people. Phenomenal one. I remember that. Patrick Johnson, I love this one. He said, Brad McQuaid played as an NPC skeleton and chased my dwarf cleric through EQ trying to kill me.
That's crazy. What a great story. Holy cow. That's like
cool
epic.
Story. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Andre Lebont says Dorn Bedin. Remember Dorn? Yep, the Dark Elf in Enro. I remember him extensively. But he says that, you know, every time he would go in there, he would get killed like crazy. So when he got to high level, he just killed him every time he could.
You have to. For me, it was Holly Windstalker. We talked about this on the other show the other night. She was great for me because she was in my starting area and she liked me. But man, she was a badass. Like she would kill so many people that were not, you know, good faction with her. Man, I remember Holly Windstalker really well.
Yeah. And then Jason Wynn here. I love how he explains it because that's like the joke in the game. Even he says that big girl in Borderlands because she's just so dang funny. He's talking about Ellie in Borderlands. She's hilarious. She's like a mechanic and she's great. But then I responded to him. I said, oh my gosh, Tiny Tina as well from Borderlands. There's a ton in Borderlands, almost all of them. But then mine here, and I actually said, you know, it's impossible for me to like label something as the most memorable. But the one that came to mind immediately, there's this little girl, and you unfortunately probably never saw this, but there's a little girl named Abby Lewis, okay? And it was in the Battle for Azeroth expansion, and you're in this really creepy, like imagine like a forest possessed by witches, and everyone's turned into like creatures and zombies, and there's like these weird scarecrow demonic creatures everywhere. It's really dark. And there's this little girl, and she's like, hee, help me. And she has you like collect. She's like, you need to collect Mr. So-and-so and Mr. So-and-so and bring them to my tea party. And they're like weird stuffed animals that are in really awkward places. So you get them all and you're like following her around and she's like, ha ha ha. And you're like chasing her and you give her stuffed animals and you put them around this tea party. Then all of a sudden a pentagram comes up underneath it and it's part of like a demonic ritual to summon this demon to kill you. It's so creepy. It was the creepiest thing, but it was so cool. Like
that's memorable.
So cool. But there's lots for me, like Sergeant Slate, Ambassador Divin, Watchman Halve. I mean, I could go on forever. You brought up Holly.
Yeah.
Is there
I'm
any
gonna
other
stick
ones?
with Holly.
Holly,
No,
yeah.
I'm gonna stick with Holly. She was the early game badass that I remember. So I like that.
Well, that's awesome. So that's it for the VR news and notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into social media and see what the discussion is all about.
Okay, so off to the PantheonMMO.com forums as we go. And this week, I want to share an interesting idea that I hadn't seen really discussed anywhere before. It's a thread called Guild Faction by community member Taldas. So this is what he writes. It says, so I was reading one of the recent threads about families and clans, and it made me think about the benefits and drawbacks of guilds. Something I've not seen before, but I think would be interesting, would be if your guild impacted your faction. So when you stop and think about it, it impacts your reputation with players. So why shouldn't an obvious association with a large group also impact your NPC faction? I don't think it should be a big swing, but something small but noticeable. So for example, if your guild had an overwhelmingly high dwarf faction, it would boost the faction of all members by some amount. maybe anywhere between 0 and 10% as a multiplier based on how high your guild's average standing with the faction is. This would create consequences for joining or leaving a guild. It would make the work feel more real as your associations have more meaning. So when I read this, it really got me thinking about how this fits into Pantheon's core tenets like social gameplay, consequence of choice, and so on. And so here's some of the responses from the community. So Jothany said, I think it would be a very interesting idea to put into a game. It would seriously alter one's relationship with their guild. I see that as also being one of the biggest ways it would make a very different game than we're used to playing or expecting to play in Pantheon. Jobson said, Eve had a pretty nice standing system that made sense. I hope Pantheon copies or improves upon it. Personal standing grew fastest, guild and core standing grew fairly slow, and base faction standing would crawl. Your idea of guild standing factoring into your personal standing would be one such improvement I would enjoy seeing. Pulling their treatment of you up or down based on the guild's standing would be understandable. Manok said, I could see it allowing players within a guild to work on opposing faction for themselves so that the guild faction would give them just enough of a nudge to be indifferent to the original faction, so they could sort of go both places but not have all the rights in the original faction, maybe just enough to sell to merchants. So he's sort of like playing both sides there. I like that idea. Ixar said, I don't see why NPCs would have any idea you're a part of any guild unless your character is wearing some sort of guild tabard or insignia, which many probably won't. Vandrad said, this idea really is guilt by association, just like a faction based on race, religion, or class. I wouldn't want to see large swings of faction just because of such an association, not even enough to move your standing up or down, even a single faction level. Counterfletch said, it's an interesting idea, but I think it would fundamentally change guilds too much and would hurt the real world social aspects of guilds as an organization for friends. Character choice and behavior would impact everyone, leading to guilds needing to be more restrictive so member characters don't cause faction problems for the other members. If this idea had more limitations so it wouldn't force the guild to be lore selective of its members, I might support it. Restrictions like the benefits only manifested when you had your guild symbol on display, or maybe it applied to subgroups within the guild. Disposalist said, yeah, I don't know. It's often weird enough that some creatures just know somehow when you have done something to offend their faction, never mind them somehow knowing that the guild you belong to has done some stuff to upset their faction. And then lastly, Mordecai said, very interesting. Main thing that pops up to me is the guild perks nonsense that WoW introduced. Can't help but think of mass recruiting guilds, and he hated that stuff. So like I said, I think it's an interesting idea, and I don't hate it in principle, but I do think it might get in the way of guilds forming just based on friendships and socialization, like somebody else said. I think Counterfletch said that, which is really important. It definitely has a greater roleplay value. So I would put myself sort of in the category of saying no, unless there was some way to exempt guild members from this limitation. So minus having heard that, do you like the idea of guild faction messing with your personal faction or vice versa?
I mean, the thing that immediately comes to mind here is that I could have a legitimate reason to have no elves in my guild.
I knew you were going to say that. They would give you a legit reason, or at least a certain type of elf.
Like maybe. No rogue, no elf wants to join our guild because our faction's so bad because of all the elves I've killed with our tag on that no elves would join our guild. So that would be a positive. No, but jokes aside, it's funny. We talked a while ago about the infamy system, and I'm wondering now, with just listening to some of the ways they referenced it without telling us much about it, if the infamy system is something based around your guild and, a faction system where you're killing so many things that you become infamous as a guild, I'm wondering, and this is total speculation, but that immediately came to mind during this topic. And I wonder if that's more we'll find out about infamy.
That's really interesting. That makes a lot of sense. And you're right. They did those were sort of mentioned in the same breath, I think on the developers roundtable when they were talking about that. So you never know. That's a good speculation though. But like you say, it is just speculation. So
yeah.
But interesting stuff. Okay, so then we're gonna introduce some new people. Like we didn't do a show last week, so we have a little bit of catching up to do with introducing folks to the community. So we'll get right to it. First up, Dat Cool Cat said, hey guys, been watching the game for a while. I finally had the funds to put some into support, so I'm excited to actually see challenging content in an MMO that requires more brain power and class individuality than rotation memorization and hyper optimization. I'm incredibly excited to be sharing this new adventure with y'all for the years to come. Morak said, "Hail, new pledge here. Just thought I'd say hi and glad to be aboard. Been watching news about Pantheon for a couple weeks now, and I'm excited to play. He played EQ1 a long time ago when Kunark first came out, and he was an Ixar warrior and then an Ixar beast lord when Luklin came out. So he's looking forward to playing a Scar shaman and a Dark Mirror monk. So he likes those sort of evil edgy races, I would say."
It's going to be weird if I end up playing a Dark Mirror.
I know. I really like it. I really like them too.
I don't know. I just don't know how that's going to play out for me. I really want to play a halfling, but I don't know now. It's going to be weird.
They're sort of like the dark temptation. It's like
when they separated
when
they separated them from elves a little bit more, they became a possibility. So
they're not just fish elves.
They're not fish elves.
They're not fish elves. No. Okay. So Rake said, "Hello, future past friends. I started way back in," he says a game here, MPBT Solaris, and I have no idea what that is. Then he moved to EQ Beta. I was completely hooked and I lasted till Luklin, but make no mistake, many, many, many hours were put into beta, initial release, and those 3 expansions. Nostalgia is a powerful thing. Couldn't agree more. Aldrian said, "Greetings all, my name is Aldrian. I've fallen back in love with MMO and MMORPGs again. However, over my grand fascination for perfection, I had to find the right game. So as I'm sure you all have found, the game isn't released yet. Insert facepalm here. Although through grand deliberation, I found myself here, happily I might add. I love the idea of building a team and making friends that you can rely on." So Saragard said, "New to pledging here. Can't wait to set foot in Terminus. I guess this is the introduction of gaming history. He's been in MMOs since before they were called MMOs. He played MUDs, Necronium, in fact, and Mushes in the early 90s, and then transitioned into visual games like Meridian 59 and Ultima Online. So thanks for having me, Pantheoners." And then lastly, Paulamai, I think is how you say it, says, "Hi all, I've been following the game for a while. It works towards release for a few years now, and don't remember if I ever stopped by to say hello. And as many have stated, my best gaming memories have come from being in a good group of folks who actually talk instead of just go, go, go all the time. Oh yeah, I saw a YouTube video where they were climbing up walls, trees, and things, and that did it for me. So cheers." He's really into the climbing. So yeah, so stop over on the forums and say hello to everybody over there. Yeah, it's always good to meet new people.
Yeah, welcome everybody, and thank you for all being a part of helping bring Pantheon to life. It's we all benefit from everyone helping, so welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Reddit this week. Actually, it was from last week, but we didn't do a show, so I'm going to go for something from last week. On the Pantheon MMO subreddit, Sparks Interface, the moderator over there, put up the Pantheon Players Questionnaire. So this is actually the 7th version of this questionnaire he's done, and the last one was about 8 months ago. And in a nutshell, it's questions that range from player demographics to gaming tendencies and on and on. It goes pretty deep, and you can tell it's been iterated on from previous versions. So I filled it out, and it really didn't take that long. The questions are really well worded for the most part. And at the end, about 300 people actually answered the questions. So the sample size here is not insignificant. Now, the results have been compiled by community member Janice and put into a Google Doc, which you can access from the comments in the thread. The document itself is super easy to comprehend. It's mostly pie charts and bar graphs, and it is absolutely fascinating to see some of the results. I'm going to read a few that I thought stood out to me because they're kind of funny. He said, so 60% of respondents wanted an official VR web-based character profile site, which is absolutely, I agree with, and I want to be able to see my badass self while I'm at work. So get that done. 92% of people, so almost everybody, said they want no flying mounts in Pantheon. So minus, in Futurama, when the professor has good news, good news, everyone, because Jabba has said there will be no flying mounts in Pantheon. So 62% of respondents talked about wanting a need before greed group looting system, but 81% of people thought Pantheon should integrate other loot options. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then lastly, 66% of respondents have no kids. So these are the people who are living free and will have time to play Pantheon as much as they're to their heart's content.
66%?
Is that kind of surprising? I kind of thought more people in the sort of demographic would have kids, but I guess not.
Maybe they moved out. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe the kids like, oh, you're going to play an MMO? Okay, I'll see you later. I'm not coming back. Anyway, there's a ton of interesting information here. We could probably do a whole show just talking about the results. And I think this is absolutely a goldmine of data for VR if they're paying attention, and I'm sure they are. Now, I'm not saying it should impact the core design, but you have to understand this kind of information about your customers and your audience. Companies pay big bucks for this to obtain, and hopefully they can utilize this in a way that helps them make Pantheon successful. And absolutely huge kudos to Sparks Interface and to Janice for their work on putting this together. And I'm looking forward to the next one. I love how people leverage their own talents in different ways when it comes to this community. So you guys, super job well done. Minus, I'm assuming you saw this and probably did the questions and checked it out.
I keep telling myself I'm going to, but like every time I click on it, it's long and like I don't have the time to do it. And like you said, it didn't take long. I guess it just tediously looks long. So I actually haven't, but it's the couple that you actually put there are pretty interesting for sure. So
at least look at the results. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that'll probably push me to do it. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
I should be part of it. I should be part of the community. So I'll have to fill that out this week.
Yeah. Okay. And then from there, we're going to check in on Facebook. There was an interesting question from Dan Riff. He asked a question. He said, have the developers ever mentioned anything about collision detection in Pantheon? So like, will mobs be able to be pushed into corners or block movement? Players can block movement. And I actually wasn't too sure about this myself. So I looked to see what the community had said. Some of the responses on the Facebook group where Ian said, I have to imagine so. Mob positioning was always crucial in EQ, and I can't imagine they would take that away. Andy said, he said basically the same thing. I know later games didn't like players blocking each other due to, griefing sort of issues. Scott said there are skills listed. This is a good point. Scott said there's skills listed on the website designed for collision, such as the Summoner's Wall and Wall spell, and clerics have the Celestial Aegis spell, which creates like a barrier type thing. I think it's a shield. Yeah. So Scott was right on with that. So maybe that's a hint, is there will be collision detection. Who knows? Marcello said it's too easy to exploit pathing and other things if you block or move creatures or NPCs. Adam said, I'd love it if it was well integrated feature, and according to some of the spells, it is. I just hope they think through it for the obvious reasons, and not to avoid some of the griefing issues like I mentioned earlier. Bradley lastly said, games like this play better without collision. Latency, crowding, pathing, it's just better to have things be able to overlap. I did do a little further digging into the forums to see if there was a definitive statement, and I don't think there is. There's definitely some interesting debates and discussions over on the forums if you go and check it out. I mean, I'll just default because I mean, I don't have a strong opinion about it, but I'll default to the way it was in EQ, with collision detection being there. And, even though it caused some issues for sure, there was that emergent gameplay aspect, which I support. So you think about it from like you could block off ads from coming into a fight by positioning yourself in front of a opening in the wall or something like that. Environmental manipulation, things like that. But like I said, it's a controversial topic. Do you know if they've talked about collision detection at all?
No, but I bet we could figure it out. I mean, at least if it's implemented yet, by watching some of the streams and seeing how the player characters navigate through each other. So we could probably figure it out just by watching like one stream, like maybe that Amber Fate one where the devs did was that New Year's or Christmas Eve or something.
Good point.
We could probably check that out there. Now, I'm actually on the opposite side with you. I do not think there should be collision detection. And if I'm not mistaken, and I don't remember when this was said, but Japa talked about, or somebody talked about this in the walls and stuff. And the theory was that you'd put the wall down and they'd have to break through the wall to get to you.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily like you're putting this wall up that they can't get through and they're just sitting there. They're going to try to break it down. So I think that those type of mechanics can be different than, player collision detection and such, because at that point, it's almost like you put a taunt mechanic into it that they have to break it, or something like that. So,
that's a good point. You're probably right.
Yeah. So I'm not 100% sure. And like, if you don't place it right and you put a wall down, like, will they just walk around it? But I would say that those are probably two different things. I don't like the player blocking just for the griefing side. And I think it actually adds more complication to things that really shouldn't be so tedious. And especially if you're going to have mobs that are different sizes. So like, wouldn't it just be beneficial for everybody to play short races at that point? Like for like fights that require a lot of movement and, getting into spots. So like, I don't love collision. I mean, I get that it was an EQ thing though. So
yeah. When you go in the forums and you look, the debates are pretty interesting because there's actually, it's quite a lengthy topic if you really dig into it, why and why not. So it's pretty interesting stuff. But good points there. So go over to the Facebook discussion if you have an opinion about that. Go and chime in on that conversation. And that's it for this week's community discussions.
Let's talk content creator updates and new additions to Pantheon.Plus. All right, so we're slightly changing this up and talking about what new content's been added to Pantheon.Plus to start this section. So Pantheon.Plus, we're putting up all the content. We're trying to be that one place you can go and find everything from all your favorite content creators, or eventually even more. So NathanNapalm put out a video called Pantheon MMO, Where Were You Level? In which he talks about the recent comments detailing play push and having more places to grind or camp or level within Pantheon. And this kind of stems from a recent community comment by Joppa, in which he stated that if it wasn't for player push, he would have never really gone to Mistmore in EQ. So good little dig into that from Nathan. After that, Theric, you published part 3 of your Lore of the Classes within the Perception of Pantheon series. And you dug into the Shaman, Druid, and Summoner classes. And, you know, I'm not trying to like make you blush, but this is what I put in my notes here. You know, these videos always kind of blow my mind because you're able to really dig into fine details of the lore and paint these like amazing pictures that I would just be totally like ignorant of. I'm gonna be completely honest. Like I could read them 100 times and not be able to understand these links that you put out there, which I love. So if you guys missed it, check it out. And you can also check out all the prior videos within Perception to Pantheon as well. So
yeah, working on part 4. Should be coming soonish.
Nice. Nathan didn't stop there. He has 2 more videos actually since our last rewind. He put out a video called World First, Game Second. And it was really based around his belief on how important, like when you're making an MMORPG, that it's like the world is more important than anything else. And that really stems back to Brad McQuaid's vision, where he said, make worlds, not games. So Nathan kind of looks into some other MMORPGs that follow this philosophy and goes into depth on it. It's a pretty neat video if you're into like the world design and what's important in an MMO. And then he finished his content offerings with a video digging heavier into climbing, where he really started to look in some of the details and little beans, as he calls it, because Nathan is responsible for the beans comment, as we said. But he kind of went into that perception storyline stream and really dug out some of the different things that he saw in climbing and put it together with some of the other stuff he's put out there already on climbing, because he's done a lot of coverage of climbing. It's something he's really important to him. He's really excited about. So there's a lot in there as well. Here at Pantheon.Plus, we went live with episode 38 of Pantheon.Plus U on Twitch, where we discussed concerns with Sacred, who came on the show, and that was a really fun show. Theric, I got to tell you, that was a good time. And it was Sacred's first time hosting. I can't thank him enough for his participation and really going hard on the topic. Between me and everybody listening now, me and Sacred have spent so many hours in the middle of the night talking about things. We've never really got to do it in a public forum, so it was pretty exciting. So for those that haven't watched the show, we had a really great turnout in the chat. Joppa was like directly communicating quite a bit with us, like trying to get more feedback on some of the questions we had or trying to answer some of them. So that was really neat. But it is important to note, however, while the episode was about our concerns for features or designs or the future of Pantheon, everyone in the community's passion and desire is to play Pantheon, and it remains unwavered. We just simply have concerns like out of love, right, for the development of the game. I think that's healthy. And I thought it was a really healthy way for the community to talk, to voice concerns, to talk through them. I thought overall it was a really, really fun show. You guys can check it out on demand on YouTube.
Yeah. Shout out to Sacred, man. He was a great co-host. You got to have him on again. He was, he's such a good, counterpoint kind of guy. Like I really liked his style.
That guy lives to be my devil's advocate. Lives for it. We could talk 5 hours about something, and at the end, he'd be like, by the way, I agree with you. Oh.
Really entertaining, really exciting show to watch.
Yeah. As we talked about earlier in the show, Bazgrim had his interview with Chris Chopper Perkins. So you guys can check that on YouTube for on demand. And just overall, it was a great week of content and news for the Pantheon fans out there. You can see it all on Pantheon.Plus. Be sure to leave comments in your favorite videos, hit that thumbs up. That will matter a lot more later, I promise. Keep in mind, we're in beta. So that's the next thing I want to talk about quickly. We're going to try to give you guys any updates that we can here, or even give feedback that's direct from you guys. So if you're listening to this show and you use Pantheon.Plus, you might hear your own feedback comments on here. So what's being worked on? So with that being said, let's talk about a few things that are under the hood right now. To begin with, we're updating the comments section across the site to get rid of the title feature, as it really just clogs up the comments and makes it rather messy. And to be honest, I hated this, but someone in the community actually recommended, I think Omega actually, that he hated it. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I hated it too. Why didn't I take this out? So We already have that removed on our beta site, which is what we build it on before we implement it over to live, so there's no downtime. So we did do that, and that should be good to go. We've also finalized the ability for users to select an avatar to represent them across the site, just something small you can do in your profile for now. We're going to do a lot more with your profile in the future. But for right now, you can pick like different class or race logos that are on the site, and we'll have much more to come you'll be able to pick from as well. Our biggest work, however, and I'm kind of giving you a really under wraps look here at what we're working on. But the biggest thing right now is we're developing an article submission tool on the site. So this is going to allow writers to post stories on Pantheon.Plus and articles that relate obviously to Pantheon. In these articles, they can not only provide information, discussion, and then get the comment system going or the voting system going on their site, but they also can use it in a way to advertise their own channels, blogs, websites, etc., as a way to like continuously promote other creators within the Pantheon community, which we want to do. So, if you have your own blog site out there, like Drac does, for example, like he can post his blogs there and redirect it back to his blog page so people can find it. And we want to be able to help people be found that are in the community. We're also excited that once this goes live, we're actually going to be looking for some writers to bring on board with Pantheon.Plus and help push even more types of content out there for people who follow us, because not everybody likes videos. And I want to give a huge shout out to Drac. Not only has he helped us with a lot of different things, and he's an amazing blog writer, but he actually is putting our article submission tool to the test, like just testing it and finding errors and bugs for us and really helping us work through it. And that's helping a ton right now. So,
yeah, I'm so excited for this feature. That's how I started engaging with Pantheon, was writing articles, and I'm a writer first and foremost before anything else, right? And when I started thinking about Pantheon and what I wanted it to be, I started writing articles, and that's how I got to know you, Midas. Is I sent you an article I'd written. I was like, hey, what do you think of this? Would this be something you'd want to, put on your website or whatever? And that's how we got to sort of know each other. So for you guys who are listening, like if you are a writer, if you have any sort of idea about something you want to write about, like this is the time to sort of start thinking about that, because we can provide a platform for that, which is what I was looking for back when I reached out to you back in the day.
Or even, like I said, if you have a website, if you have any, we don't look at other content creators as competitive. We want to bring everybody together and help with everything we can, because people helped us get to where we're at, and we want to continue to share that love. So,
yeah.
So that's going to be a huge part of future projects. And I'll give you a little spoiler here. Things like guide creation that we want to put in the hands of the Pantheon community. So there's a lot more to come on that on a much later date. There's no exact date when these will be available live. Just follow us on Twitter and we'll definitely announce there. Currently keep in mind the site is in beta form. So if you guys don't know already, we super value any feedback. So if it's something you don't like, something you want in the future, errors you find, please contact us with the hamburger menu. There should be a contact us link and it'll send email right to us. So lots more to come. Guys, what you're seeing now is nothing. It's just framework that enables us to do quite a bit. So that's it for Pantheon.Plus.
Discounts, upcoming games, and general rants. Here's our wish list.
Okay, so we're going to switch it up a bit this week and try a few new things. Now, neither Midas and I could match Omega's investigative journalism when it comes to genre news. So we didn't want to offer everyone like a watered down news piece. So we're trying to find a segment and Midas mentioned earlier we're going to do a segment called the wish list. And this is, again, things can change, but we're gonna go with this for now. So, but if you have feedback from this, we're always looking to make the show better. So if you like something or you don't like something, or if you just have an idea about a segment that you want us to think about, send an email to me. It's Theric@Pantheon.Plus. You can DM me on Twitter @PantheonTheric, or you can ping me on Discord at Theric2057. So I'd love to hear from you guys, because it's because of this podcast, because of you guys, that it's been successful, and let's keep it going together. But as you heard in the bumper, what this week we're doing is going to be called the wish list. So here, Midas and I are going to talk about the games we're currently playing, or maybe a game we're looking forward to playing soon. It's safe to say we have lots of games in our backlog, and we're always thinking, I should really find the time to play that someday. Or maybe there's a game that's coming out soon that we're sort of eagerly awaiting. And lastly, we're going to give you a quick rundown of some of the best games on sale this week. So whether it's on Steam, GOG, or wherever, and Midas and I are going to choose our sort of deal of the week, so to speak, with a sale that we think offers the best bang for the buck. If you're like me, finding those sweet deals out there is like getting that rare drop, right? You're always on the hunt for it. So So my wish list this week is about a game that just showed up this week on Steam Early Access, and it's a game called The Waylanders. And I have no idea how I didn't know about this game until only a month ago, because I learned about it from the NathanNapalm channel in his video, which brought it to my attention. So if you haven't seen that, go to his YouTube channel, check out the video. There's a link in the description for it. But here's what the game description on the Steam page says. It says, quote, Waylanders is a classic party-based RPG featuring some of the top talents who brought well-known titles within the genre like Dragon Age, Mass Effect, and Pillars of Eternity sagas to light. So as you guys know, I'm a big fan of classic RPGs, especially the ones they listed. And if you guys listen to this team that's making the Waylanders, you'll see why I'm hopeful for it. So the team members are Chris Avallone, Mike Laidlaw, Emily Buck, and Einon Zur. So that's pretty much an all-star team of RPG developers and sort of visionaries. Honestly, Chris Avallone on his own would sell me on the game because I'm a huge fan of his. Here's some of the features that they list for Waylanders. So it's a unique party-based experience that time travels between two distinct eras, the Celtic and the medieval. It has multiple endings. Choices made in one period of time can have dire consequences in the other, meaning players will feel the impact of the decisions in surprising and shocking ways. Strategy and innovation. It features formations, unique formations for deep tactical combat, full character customization, 6 basic, 30 advanced classes, 5 playable races based on Celtic mythology, and different origins for your character. And this is the most important feature in my mind, is companions. So they're an integral part of the RPG experience. And the Waylanders offers a variety of traveling companions that can join you on your journey. The player will be able to talk to the companions in depth, discover their past, and play loyalty missions, and even experience romances with them. So there's a little bit of that Dragon Age flavor going in there. So I really like that kind of stuff. Anyway, like I said, it's in early access right now and it's 10% off. So it's $35 Canadian. But if you're like me, maybe just hold off until it's fully released, or just add it to your wish list for now. But if you're into early access stuff, then go ahead and give it a shot. Now, my deal of the week is a game that I absolutely love called Firewatch. It's 75% off over on GOG on Good Old Games. It's usually $27. It's down to $7 Canadian. So this game really drew me into its story. And it's about a guy named Henry who's basically retreated from his life to work as a lookout in a Wyoming wilderness. And that's sort of a really simplistic way of describing it, because there's a huge story here and I don't want to spoil anything, but the voice acting, the game design, and the music are all top notch. The music in particular, I want to give a special nod to. It's Chris Remo is the artist who did it. He did music for games like Gone Home as well, and I really like. And there's a quick funny thing about this game. If you bought it back when it came out, in the game you acquire a disposable camera and you actually take pictures of everything you see. So like you're out in the Wyoming wilderness sort of thing. And in the game, when you took those pictures, you could actually send them to the developer, your virtual camera roll, and they would develop the photos and send them back to you in the mail, like real printed photos. So it's probably not still an option, but it's just a super cool idea. So again, it's $7, and so if you're in the US, it's like what, a nickel. So go and grab it while you can. So minus what's on your wish list for the week.
Yeah, good stuff. I'm gonna like this segment. I think we can go a lot of ways with wish list. Like I could even sit here and just rant about something I wish would happen in Pantheon, right? That would work.
Totally. Do it, man.
All right.
Whatever.
All right. Okay. Back on track. So as far as upcoming game or recent launch game I'm looking forward to, like if I'm honest, I could just be so cheesy and just talk about Diablo 4 until the end of time, because we have no idea when it's coming out. So I won't be cheesy, and I will just tell you that there will be plenty of that discussed in the wish list. However, on June 16th, the game Dead by Daylight put out a new chapter, and it's sort of like a DLC from what I gather, like each chapter. And this chapter is entitled Chapter 16, Silent Hill. Now, admittedly, this game has been on my radar since it launched because I'm a huge horror fan, but this just dramatically put me over the top. And I think I'm going to have to finally bite the bullet and check this game out. So for those of you that don't know about this game already, it's described as an asymmetrical multiplayer horror game in which one player takes the role of a brutal killer and the other 4 players play as the survivors. As the killer, your goal is to sacrifice or as many of the survivors as possible. And as a survivor, your goal is to escape or avoid being caught and killed. Now, honestly, I have no idea how I haven't tried this game yet, because up until this point, the game has its own killers and its own stories. but this game actually already has featured Michael Myers, Leatherface, Freddy Krueger. There's a chapter that's themed after Saw. There's an Ash vs. the Evil Dead. There's Ghostface from Scream. There's Stranger Things, and now Silent Hill's Pyramid Head. Honestly, I don't know how long I'll play it, but I'm in. I've waited so long. I don't know if it's good, but if I can be Pyramid Head, like I'd even play a MOBA mixed with a battle royale game made by Daybreak, like to be Pyramid Head. So I'm in.
Wow.
So check this out. This is what's cool about this this first wish list. So we're supposed to say a title we want to play, or well, guess what? It's on sale. It's actually on sale until July 8th. And it's currently 41% off because Steam is really weird and just picks odd percentages for no reason. So you can get the base game with Silent Hill, the brand new chapter, and 4 other chapter packs for only $32.34. It's actually pretty good. And this is on Steam. The other packs are all original characters. So if you want to Freddy it up, you're going to have to buy additional chapters. However, the additional chapter packs are also 50% off right now. So I'll probably end up wanting to get a few more so that I can kill people. Oddly enough, I really want to play as Ghostface because I just feel like that environment's probably funny because it's just suburbia. So
I want to do the Stranger Things. That's the only one that I'm like, yeah, I would be interested in doing is like the Stranger Things characters because that's kind of weird.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so Theric, I was going to say you should buy it because I want to hunt you down as Pyramid Head.
Yeah, terrified.
I think it'll just be really good practice for Pantheon when I go hunt elves. If you just run around while I'm Pyramid Head, I think that'd be really fun.
So is it like one-on-one, or is it like me and some other people would be there if you're the hunter?
Yeah, I'm the hunter, and there's 4. It's 4-on-1.
Okay,
the hunter versus 4 survivors. Yeah, and like every chapter is a different environment. Like it's a different map. So like in the Silent Hill, I guess it's very Silent Hill-like, right? So like I think it kind of matches the theme in a sense. So
I got you. Okay, as long as I don't have to outrun everybody. I just have to outrun one person.
Yeah,
I'll be okay.
Or unless they trip you or something, so I can get to you with my sword.
No.
Now you stole my joke.
No.
So but I'm gonna say it anyway. Unfortunately, I can't see how much it is in Canada. So I wrote here, I think if my conversion's right, it's like $32 in the USA. So it's probably only about $700 for you. Something like that.
That sounds about right. That sounds about right.
My math might be off.
Not much.
All right, guys. Well, anyway, thank you for a little bit of an extended edition here. We went 12 minutes over. That's actually not incredibly bad, but we are going to have to add bumpers in and do some editing. So it'll probably be a little bit longer. But not too bad considering all the things we had to talk about with the changes to Pantheon.Plus, the changes in some of the segments, wishing Omega the best of luck. Theric, it's me and you going forward, but I think we got this. Are you ready to keep rolling these out?
Definitely. So yeah, great to know we're going to keep moving forward with this. But cheers, Omega. It's been a pleasure, man.
Yep. And thank you to everybody who listens. And please, as always, please give us your feedback and let us know what you think. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon.Plus Rewind. Be sure to follow Minus and all Pantheon.Plus related content on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube under the name Pantheon.Plus. Also, be sure to follow Theric at PantheonTheric on Twitter. Keep up to date on all Pantheon Rise of the Fallen information on www.Pantheon.Plus, the definitive source for all media of Pantheon. Until next time.